Everybody with Angela Williamson is made possible by Fireheart Pictures and viewers like you. Thank you. Last season, we started a special episode we called Women Trailblazers. This special episode is dedicated to amazing women laying the groundwork for a brighter future. Tonight, we talk with two women who use their art as a mission to bring awareness to issues like teaching our children about COVID, mental illness, and diversity. I'm so happy you're joining us.
From Los Angeles, this is KLCS PBS. Welcome to Everybody with Angela Williamson, an innovation, arts, education, and public affairs program. Everybody with Angela Williamson is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you. And now your host, Dr. Angela Williamson.
Marsha, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I want to talk about your books because you have written some wonderful children's books to help our children cope with various different issues. But before we do that, I want to learn a little bit more about you. So how does Marsha get to this part of your life where you start writing these books?
Okay, so Marsha got to this part by, I also write adult books. And my mom asked me to could I write a children's book? And I thought about it, and I was like, yeah, I could do that. So I wrote a book called Pinkie's Weather Legs. And it's about a little girl who suffers from pain anytime the weather changes. And so in the South, they have an old saying that anytime your legs or your bones ache, that the weather's going to change. So she would go to school and tell all the kids that it was going to rain and things like that. And they didn't believe her. And she said she knew because, and she went through the process of telling them her grandma told her she had weather legs. It was an old wise tale. So they spent the day looking for rain, and then eventually it rained. And so that's how I got into writing children's books. And then I just thought about it, and I was like, what do I want the kids to learn? What do I want them to know? I want the book to have a message, so I went from there. And that's how I just started writing books and started writing children's books, and it just kind of came natural to me.
Well, and I love how you're saying it came natural for you, because you actually turn big issues into a story for little minds to understand.
Right. I wrote a book. We were going through the pandemic,
Yes.
and we had to go home from school. I'm a preschool teacher, and we had to leave school, and just all of a sudden we were gone, and all the kids were kind of scared and didn't know what was going on, and I felt so bad, and I was like, what can I do? Because we had to imagine video teaching little 4-year-olds. We had to go to virtual classes because school couldn't just stop, so we went to virtual classes. And so I would support my other teachers because I'm a head teacher where I work. I still don't really have a classroom, so I would support them. So I was like, how can I support them? How can we talk about what's going on? So I thought about it. I was like, let me try to explain the corona in a way that kids can understand. So I compare the coronavirus with glitter, because we work with glitter at school, and glitter is just the messiest thing in the world.
But I miss glitter.
Yeah, they kind of took it out because of certain stuff. But so I wrote a book called Corona and the Glitter. Corona is a virus that lives in the laboratory, and she gets out, and she can make herself invisible. So you can't see her. And all she wanted to do was play with the people outside. But her touch made the people hot and sick, all the symptoms, runny noses, sore throats, headaches, all those things. The only thing is they couldn't see her because she made herself invisible. And her little glitter was the virus that was sprinkling on the kids. And so they kind of got it. And so I didn't want them to be scared. I wanted them to be aware, but not scared. Because we were all scared. We didn't know what was going on. And so I did that, and the kids, they got it. And so they understood, when we came back, we had to wear masks. We had to stay 6 feet apart. We had all these new rules. We had to disinfect everything all day. And the good thing about that, in preschool, if you've ever been into a preschool, we disinfect everything all day anyway.
You have to, though, for that age, right?
For that age. So it wasn't like something new for us to jump into, because these are things that we do. The only tricky part was we promote socialization. We promote playing close together. We promote sharing toys. So then we had to talk about why we can't do that at this time. And why when we get through playing with toys, we have to put them there. But the book helped a lot because they got a visual of what was going on. They got phrases that we started using: socially distancing, staying at home, disinfecting, wearing masks, not going to large gatherings. We had this thing where we would greet each other in the morning. You would get a high five or a hug. Something we've been doing for years. So then we start doing the fist bump or the air kiss. But it's funny because we as adults don't do well with change. But children do. They kind of catch on. They kind of go with the flow. So if I say this is what we're going to do today, it takes them a minute to get used to it. But they kind of because they're like little sponges. They just soak up everything. So that book was kind of I was one of my favorites because it was something that was going on in the real world, and it was something that I brought to the classroom. And it didn't, in no means was I desensitizing it or making it smaller than what it was. Exactly what it was going on. So that was a book that I enjoy. And the school district ended up buying a lot of those books. So all the classrooms in pre-K got one. So that was a good thing.
Well, in the end, that was a good thing, but it's a remarkable thing. You as an educator saw an issue and you saw a way to address it to the children that you serve. You've been teaching how many years? I've
been in for the Long Beach Unified School District. I've been there for 22 years. So I've been serving that community for 22 years. And it's so crazy because I had a student, I was outside and I opened the gate up and I'm letting the kids in. A old student came up to me and she's like, "Oh, I saw your book," and they bought me flowers. It was so cute, but it was like, you made this positive impact on my life. And I am so sensitive, I start crying and everything. But she's an adult now and she's going to college, and she said, "And I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to be a preschool teacher." And I just started bawling. So it was just like, okay, Marsha, get it together.
Well, you obviously have it together. Definitely. And I want to talk about the other book that you have, but I just want to ask you one more question about this, because you gave such a wonderful resource to teachers, not just in your own district, for teachers in other districts as well. How important is it for us to be able to communicate effectively to the students that we teach? Because you obviously take this issue to heart.
It's extremely important because we want the children I and the teachers that I work with, we set the foundation for learning because we're in preschool. So, and we get the opportunity to talk to the parents, whereas K through 12 might not get that opportunity, but we do. I communicate with them all day. So we are like a partnership. At school, this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to produce. And at home, this is what you're going to bring to the table. So we're all going to work together. So we kind of set that foundation for learning for the children. So when they go to K through 12, this is what you need to expect. And then I always tell the parents, be as active as you can be because you are your child's first teacher. I only have them for a couple of hours of a day. You have them all day. So when they're there, it's very important that we model language, we model behavior, we talk about sensitive subjects, and we get an understanding of this is what we do at school, and this is what is expected of you, and this is what is expected of your parent. Because the parent ultimately is responsible for the education. I'm the vessel that's going to bring it to them and give it to them.
And you have been such a wonderful vessel. In fact, you've continued this with your writing and your art. COVID was such a sensitive subject, and you were able to do that well. So you now have another book. So which book are we talking about here?
We're going to talk about what is death. So to me, it's like a follow-up to COVID because a lot of people died from COVID. Even though I put it in a form where the children could understand. In the book, I never mentioned that people were actually dying because if you think about death in kids, we think about that's something that we don't really want to bring the kids. Like, do they understand death? Do they understand what's going on? So what happened was My brother passed away, not from COVID, but during the COVID crisis, so it was awful. And so a part of my therapy for myself was writing about it, because writing could be therapy. So I was like, what do I want the kids to know? What happened was I saw my niece, and she was his granddaughter, and the expression on her face was just like, it was something that I couldn't take away from her, something that I couldn't like shield her from. But I was thinking to myself, does she understand what's going on? If we talked about it more, would it be less of a shock to a child? And then I was thinking about my own self. When I was a little kid, we didn't get to go to funerals and talk about death. So I was like, maybe if we expose them to what might happen, if something like that does happen, they won't be so scared of it. Because we had a couple kids at school where their grandparents, aunties, uncle, they died of COVID. So I was like, okay, what can we do? So I thought about what is death. So in the book, it talks about what is death? What is dying? What is a funeral home? What is a cemetery? What is this casket that they put people inside of? And it's not sugar-coated, but it's enough for them to understand that this is the process. This is what's going to happen. We talk about, in this book, I talked about going to grief therapy. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to feel okay. It's okay to be mad. It's okay to be sad. So we talk about a range of emotions in this book. So this book was kind of like therapy for me too. But just and I read this book the other day to the kids for the first time. I read it to 4-year-olds. And I started out with life. How do you know we're living? How do you know we're alive? And so we started talking about what do we need. It was so cute because the little girl said, all you need is snacks.
Oh.
I
like her thinking.
Yeah,
I was snacks
like, I
too.
like snacks. And so the little kid's like, you need water. And so we talked about that. So I was like, well, what do you think death is? Do you know anybody who died? And a little girl stood up and she said, yes, I do. My grandma died. And so we talked about how she felt. How did that make you feel? And she said, it made me sad. And then I said, how do you feel about it now? So we had a whole conversation on death. And so the kids got it. And it was heavy, but it had to be done because now I got more information from the kids because they did kind of know what a cemetery was and what a graveyard was. And one said, I went to a funeral and, we had food. And so we talked about it. So they got the concept of being dead, meaning you're not coming back. I didn't say like where you might go or, because no one knows. So I made that clear, like no one knows. It's just something that happens in life. So we talked about that, and that was what is death. Now this book here.
Well, there's just so much. Would you mind coming back again?
I would love to come back.
Okay, good. Because we didn't get a chance, but these 2 books that you talked about are so important right now. But I would love for you to come back so we can talk more about these books in detail.
Okay.
But our audience will want to know how they can get these books. So you have...
All of these books are on Amazon.com. So you can just order them from Amazon. Or you can order them from my website at marshabullock.com. So all of them are available for you. And all of them are on ebook. So you can ebook them. It's something new for me that I've been doing because, I work with kids and I see a lot of kids with iPads. So you could just iPad it. So a lot of them, all of them, you can order directly from Amazon.
Now. But these are perfect too for early educators like yourself to use in the classroom.
And I've read every single one. My kids in my school are kind of like my little test subjects. But like, when I read this book, and the kids are so funny, are we going to read the book that we wrote? Because when I'm writing a book, I'm like telling them, like, I'm going to write this book. What do you think? And so it's so cute. And so I read it to them, but they got it.
Well, Marsha, thank you so much
Thank
for using your art to help all of our children cope with different events in life. And I cannot wait for you to come back so we can talk more. Because we need to talk about these other books in detail. But in the meantime, you let the audience know where to get them. And we will talk more about that.
Amazon.com, Marsha Bullock.
Oh, and we'll make sure it's on
Okay.
the lower third so
Okay.
people can see it too.
Okay.
We'll make sure they find your website.
Okay.
But I can't wait for our next conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you are definitely a woman trailblazer, so thank you so much for
you.
being here. And come back as I continue this conversation with another trailblazer, Virginia Rose, in the beautiful city of Malibu.
Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
This one's for the real ballers and shot callers, the sisterhood of women in tech. They're discovering cures, building apps, and programming the blockchain. They're CEOs, worldwide hustlers who can make it rain. They're tearing down the old boys club and seeing big gains. Because when women in tech come together, you know they make that change.
Welcome back. We are here in beautiful Malibu. We want to continue our conversation, Art with a Mission, with our friend, Virginia Rose. Welcome, Virginia Rose. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Angela. You know I'm a huge fan of yours.
I'm a huge fan of yours, and that's why you're here today. But first, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Virginia Rose, and I live currently in the greater Washington, D.C. area, but I'm originally a Florida native. I am a fashion photographer who started as a model over 20 years ago, and I've been in the industry for a very long time. I have a little bit of acting under my belt, a little bit of painting, and currently I host a show called La Dolce Vita with Virginia Rose as part of a movement as artists supporting artists.
And we're going to talk a lot more about your podcast in a minute because it's doing so many incredible things. But my question to you is, when did you decide that you wanted to be a photographer? It didn't just happen for you, right?
Right. I was actually a figure skater, Angela, and that's quite an expensive sport, and I needed to support my career. I got a summer job at Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida at MGM Hollywood Studios, shooting celebrities when I was only 16 years old. And it really lit me on fire as far as just the glitz and the glam and being around all the celebrities. And I had already had some modeling experience, so I kind of collided the two as a way to make a living, and I just ran with it for the last 20 years.
So in that job, because of what you had experienced before as a model, you knew how to shoot people right away so they get their best side, their profile. So when did that start to click for you that you had this natural talent for photography?
Looking at the pictures, and a few people said, wow, this looks like a postcard, or you never take a bad picture, and they would give me compliments from a very young age. And I have to tell you, after only 4 days at Disney, they sent me to casting, and they were thinking about promoting me, and then they looked at my resume or my application and realized that I was only 16 years old, and they said, sorry sis, you gotta wait a couple more years. But I just ran with it, and I stuck with it. And I think anything, if you stick with it, and you work really hard and you never give up. I wanna really put a lot of energy into that. Don't ever give up, because it's not always easy being a photographer, as you've probably seen in different types of photo shoots. Sometimes weather issues, sometimes you have a cranky model. I mean, many different issues can come up, but if you just give it your all and you continue, the sky's the limit for you.
Well, and that's the case with a lot of artists as well, because when people want to show their art or do something different, they don't realize that it takes time to develop their style. And so when did you realize that you had to really start to develop your style, Virginia Rose's style, as a photographer? Because you had so much in the background already starting.
I would say about 10 to 11 years ago, I decided that I was going to go out on my own. I didn't want to work for commercial studios anymore, and I didn't want to be put in a box. I didn't want to use their props, or commercial studios sometimes prevent you from going outside to shoot your clients because you have to shoot inside the studios for insurance purposes. And I knew that I wanted to do more. So I decided to go on my own after journaling for 7 years about what it would look like if I went out on my own. That was about in 2010. And I did a big move. I lived on 10 acres of land. And I just decided to just do it, make a decision. I started to build my own sets. I started creating vision boards, and I just started dreaming big and just putting my mind to it. I would do editorial shoots. I would submit to magazines, and now I've been published over 700 times.
700 times. That is so amazing. But you said something that I want to touch upon, because I'm sure there's someone out there right now that's thinking about maybe changing their career. Maybe they have a love of some type of art. Maybe it's painting, photography like yourself, but they don't know where to start. And you mentioned a few things. You mentioned journaling, and you mentioned vision boards. So how important is that for an artist to start to look ahead by doing those two activities?
It's extremely important to not just think a thought, but to write that thought down. Once that thought and that idea makes it to paper, the chances of it becoming, like, coming to fruition is going to be a lot more probably successful. And hopefully I said that correctly. Once you write it down and you start to put that energy and that effort and that intention, we'll say the word intention. Intention is so big, and then become aware of what your goals are. Start building and working towards that. That's where the vision boards come up. If you can see it, you can, if you dream it, you can see it. If you see it, you can believe it, and then start making effort. Collect props, check your local Goodwill stores. Start building some things around you of what you would like to do creatively for your shoots, and just go for it.
I love that you said that, because you mentioned intention. And during the height of our pandemic, you set intentions for yourself.
Yes.
And that led to a new opportunity for you that's not quite photography, but still supporting artists. And that's the reason you're here today. So tell us about that.
So in my darkest moment, I have to start with the dark, because a lot of people throughout the pandemic, especially artists, gig workers, makeup artists, hairstylists, actresses, producers, all those kinds of things, they went through a very dark period, as did the world. And I think for artists, when we are cut off from creating, we're actually cut off from a form of our oxygen supply. And it's very difficult for us just to get out of bed in the morning. So after going through a dark period up until about July, I'm a spiritual person. I really started to pray. And a lot of my friends that were industry professionals came to me and they said, we're sad. Like, what are we going to do? How long is this going to go on? And I just kept praying. And I felt a message that was kind of sent through me. If you can't find the light, be the light. And this idea for a podcast, I had done some FM radio, and people have always said, you have a very tranquil voice. I love your voice. And I was like, okay, what if I shined? I can't fix my situation, and I can't fix the world right now, but what I can do is I can show support for the people that I love and the artists that I love and what they're doing. And that's artists of all kind. And we're in season 2 right now. We have about 70 something shows under my belt. We have listenership in 31 countries, and we just built a very new website, which anyone is welcome to join at joinvirginiarose.com. And I'm so excited. And by people subscribing and listening to the shows, they're supporting artists, and it doesn't cost any money to support industry professionals.
I love the background of your podcast.
Thank you.
You are now in season 2.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to go back to season 1 and tell me at least 2 of your favorite shows and why.
Okay, so I have so many favorites, Angela, but I think the few shows that stick out to me the most are ones where I got such a huge response because they did something in someone's life. Someone forgave someone that they hadn't forgiven in a long time, or they reached out to me and said, hey, I've lost weight, I'm taking better care of my mental health. or, you know, I've connected with my partner better, because yes, I do interview artists, but I also interview leading experts and doctors that support artists. And so it's really a spiritual self-help podcast that really, after the end of every episode, you're going to feel uplifted, and people are going to share some incredible stories with you.
And as you move into season 2, what guest haven't you had yet, but you would think this person would be the perfect guest? And you don't have to tell us a name, just what you're looking for that perfect guest to continue that momentum that you started in season 1.
Well, I think I would like to interview somebody that does stunt work, because I think that's a form of an art, and it's very adventurous and exciting, and just kind of hear about the backstory and how someone would get into that. And I'd like to interview more artists that do different types of art, perhaps a sculptor or someone of that nature, and just keep it going with the artist movement and supporting people. I've interviewed different types of painters and singers, but I really would like to keep growing that and see just how many different types of artists that I can get on the podcast so we can show our support.
And I'm going to ask you something it's pretty serious, and a lot of people don't really discuss it because they think you're an artist, you're creative, and that means that you are 100% happy all the time. And that's not the case with artists. There's a lot of issues right now, especially with mental illness, that's happening in the art world. And so you took that up as your mission to bring light to that. But why do you feel that that's so important to let people know about that right now?
Well, personally, I had suffered from some anxiety and depression even before the pandemic. Being an artist and a creative, especially if you're a self-starter, if you work in a solo space, you don't have a manager necessarily to pat you on the back and tell you, hey, you did a good job. We're our own worst critics. Sometimes we can get buried in the darkness, alone with our pieces or whatever we're working on, the project we're working on. So I think by exposing ourselves a little bit in this type of way, in an interview type of way, I think people are going to learn a lot about the stories of artists. And we all have a story. We all have an incredible story, and it's not always bright and shiny. Sometimes the darkness is what made us the most amazing artists in the world.
You have so many wonderful guests on your show, and they are artists and they have their own issues in life. So what do you think that your artists are getting after they interview with you on your show?
Well, for one, they're getting the Virginia Rose experience, which I pride myself on being the best possible host I can. It's so important to me. But I think more importantly, they're being validated. Their stories are being validated. They're getting illumination. They're getting a sparkle, a light shined upon them. Personally, that's for them, for an entire episode about what they're doing to impact the world with their artistry.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us, Virginia, and joining us in Malibu today. Before I let you go, please tell our viewers how they can reach out to you and connect with you out there.
First of all, I just want to say you're most welcome, and the pleasure and honor is all mine. I am so happy to be joining you in Malibu today, Angela, and you know you're my favorite host, so I love it so much. But you can go on joinvirginiarose.com. We just launched our new website for the podcast, and it's as easy as scrolling and subscribing, and then you'll get all the new episodes right to your email. You can also go on La Dolce Vita podcast with Virginia Rose on social media, or you can find me at virginiarosefineart.com.
I love that. And thank you so much. And continue to do what you're doing using your art for a mission.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on Everybody with Angela Williamson. It's viewers like you that make this show possible. We will continue this conversation on social media, so follow us. Good night and stay well.